So welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us. We're going to wait a couple of minutes for everyone to join us, and then we'll begin. All right, I think we can start. Welcome everyone to today's webinar, dedicated to helping new and not so new compliance leaders succeed in their roles. My name is Esther Pinto, and I'm the head of information security at Anecdotes and the co-founder of Compliance Overflow, a community for InfoSec compliance professionals. I'm very excited to speak today about one of my favorite topics, success. So, what are we going to cover today? We will start with a quick overview of the unique challenges that we all face as compliance leaders and goals to focus on in your first year. Then we will discuss practical roadmap for the first week, month, and quarter on the job. And of course, what comes next. After the presentation, I will be joined by Spencer Sheehan and Tim Anderson for a conversation where we'll discuss some of our own experiences and hopefully provide some insight that will help you avoid the mistakes we made so you can kick ass in your roles. If you have any questions, please share them in the Q&A box. Okay, let's dive right in. It might be hard to hear, but it's time we face it. We, compliance leaders, are the camp counselors of an organization. Most of the time, especially if we haven't set ourselves properly, we're perceived as annoying. The kids in the bank, or the other departments in our case, just want to enjoy their summer or do their job. They don't want to listen to the counselor who keeps reminding them of the rules. Kids typically don't understand why the counselor is there and why that function is critical to the outcome of the summer. They don't think they may come better. And if anything, the opposite is true. Sounds familiar? As a counselor, you also need to know each of your campers, their needs, their allergies, what they do and don't like to do. You need to know what next activity is you basically have to be an expert on, anything that goes on in camp. In the same way, a compliance leader needs to be a semi-expert in every facet of the organization. In order to do our jobs well and succeed, we need to understand HR processes, the sales pipeline, the R&D roadmap. You get the idea. These are serious challenges, and we need a roadmap to overcome them. But before we can build a roadmap, we need to decide on a destination. What is it that we want to achieve? Every summer, in every camp, there is a counselor who managed to get their bank to worship them. The campers do everything the counselor says, and they enjoy doing it. Now, we may not need the organization to worship us, but we can learn a few things from those counselors. They manage to get their campers on board because they are smart enough to get their campers to recognize that the summer will be better if they follow the rules. That is what we want to achieve as compliance leaders. We want to do our job, make sure our company defines and reaches its compliance goals. But at the same time, we want to get all the stakeholders in the company on our side, willing to work with us and make sure they recognize the value we create for the company. So those are our goals for the first 3 months on the job. And honestly, those are the goals in the position overall. But how we're going to achieve these goals? The answer is by following the roadmap, the special formula we designed. In the first week, you need to be a diplomat. In the first month, you need to become an investigator. In the first quarter, you will be an architect. And from that point on, all that's left to do is be a superstar. Now let's break it down. Before you start your first week, you need to adopt a new mindset. We're all at this webinar because we share a view that compliance is important, and it is, but it's not what should drive decisions in a company. Businesses. As compliance leaders, we need to adopt a business-oriented, pragmatic approach to our work. We have to find a way for compliance to serve the greater goals of the business, not the other way around. Now, with that new mindset, it's time to start your first week. This week should be all about getting to know the organization and, more importantly, the people in it. Start by meeting with the departments that drive the business decisions. Usually those are sales, R&D, and product, but it will depend on your organization. If you want to truly understand where a company is and where it's going and need to be good at your job, you need to understand that meeting those departments is key. You need to be a diplomat in those meetings. Be polite and kind. Everything you say sounds smart and gracious, but not deep enough to upset anyone. Set a meeting with every department head for at least an hour. Start with getting to know them by establishing a friendship. This will be extremely valuable down the line. Then ask them about their department. What are the right goals for the quarter? What are the challenges? How can you help? Get as much information as you can and don't let the meeting end before you completely understand what they do. I cannot overstate how important this stage is. These conversations are the difference between being the annoying counselor and being the cool fun counselor. They're also key to building your understanding of the organization. That understanding is the basics for your success. The most important rule for this meeting is do not talk about compliance. If you bring up compliance in your first meeting, you will lose your audience. There will be plenty of time for that in the future. So for now, focus on building your relationship and understanding the business. At the end of the week, after you have had meetings with all of the department heads and many other stakeholders, you should start identifying your champion in each department. What do I mean by that? The champion is the person who can tell cares about compliance. Or alternatively, a person who would you have gotten closest with will help you as a friend. These people will be the most important allies as you move forward. Now let's talk about your first month. This is the time to really investigate, to take a deep dive into the organization's compliance posture. First things first, set a meeting with management for the end of your first quarter to present your compliance program, calendar, and your KPIs. Management likes numbers and goals that they can evaluate you on. Setting this meeting will indicate that you are both on top of your task and that you are diving right into work. Then it is time for triage. Before you can start planning ahead, make sure that there is nothing urgent that needs to be taken care of. Look out for any immediate dangers that cannot wait a few more weeks. You should also start identifying low-hanging fruits you can pick in order to have a few quick wins. It will take time for you to show substantial value, so it's important to find places where you can show value from the beginning. Some examples are making sure that marketing has all the information about your compliance posture, which can help bring in new leads, or implementing small things like MFA. The bulk of this month should be spending mapping gaps in the organization's compliance posture, really understanding where the organization is in terms of compliance, and more importantly, what is missing. In order to do this, here are a few questions to start with. What policies are in place and are they being followed? What is the level of awareness among employees? What is our next audit and what is prepared for it? Are marketing and sales brief on all aspects of your compliance posture? Once you have answered for these questions, it is time to finally do what we're paid for, compliance. Start by building a compliance program that outlines your organization's ongoing future compliance activities. Your program should anticipate the evolving complexity of your organization's tech stack and should foresee where the product and the business are heading and should support changing legal requirements. Basically, it should build on everything you learn in your first month. If you want to learn more, there is a dedicated guide to building a comprehensive compliance program on the Anecdotes website. Once you have built your plan, it's time to translate it into a compliance calendar. Try to set realistic goals that you can meet, but make sure you are being ambitious enough you don't get called out in meetings with management. Remember that you won't be able to achieve everything in first year. Compliance is a marathon, not a sprint. When building your calendar, make sure you're taking upcoming audits and product launches into consideration. If something in your calendar requires input or resources from other departments, make sure they are aware of the calendar as soon as you set it. Communicating things ahead of time and doing so with transparency will continue to build those important relationships with stakeholders. And like I said, those are crucial for your success. As you build your calendar, start making a list of the resources you are going to need. Those resources could be additional staff or different tools or even consultants. Create a budget that you can present to management and explain what you need it for. There are a few things I recommend to keep in mind when you think about your compliance program and the resources you'll need. You should always be thinking about how you can be more efficient. One way to do that is through automating as much of the process as you can. Some of that can be done internally, especially if you have a larger team, and some of it can be done through external compliance operating system. Automatically collecting evidence and monitoring compliance posture saves a lot of time and frustration in the organization, and most importantly, it saves money. It will save you from chasing after stakeholders for screenshots again and again because they aren't up to date or they're not what the auditor wants. Automation is the key to making your life easier as a compliance leader, and it will enable you to have time to focus on the things that really matter. Another tip is to cross-map your work. Try and find the overlapping controls in different frameworks and requirements you're working on, and make sure that you are not doing unnecessary work. Proper planning can save you a lot of time, and it can save the organization a lot of resources. So, congratulations! You have just finished your first quarter. You met with management and they were incredibly impressed with you, how you're going to turn compliance into a business enabler. Now, how do you make sure to deliver all of your promises and continue to establish yourself as a value creator in the organization? First, make sure that you attend all strategic meetings. You need to constantly know what is focused on and where the organization is headed to make sure your compliance program is up to date. If necessary, make changes. Keep being pragmatic and always make sure your compliance strategy is aligned with the business goals. Second, do not neglect the relationship you spend time building in your first quarter. The diplomatic part of your job never ends, even with automation. Your interactions with other stakeholders may be minimized, but they don't disappear. And besides that, it's just nice to work in a place where you're friendly with people. Trust me. It is also important to remember to pick your battles. There are things you will see people doing that will drive you crazy. But before you say something, think about how bad it really is and whether it's worth commenting on. If you comment on everything, you're going to be tagged as the annoying camp counselor. No one wants that. Last but not least, don't be afraid to be your own advocate. Make sure that you are communicating your progress and achievements to the rest of the team. Help them see the value you are creating by making sure the organization has a strong compliance posture. I am confident that if you follow the formula I just outlined, You will set yourself up for great success in your role. If you have any questions about anything I just covered, please let us know in the chat and I will make sure to get back to you. In the meantime, let me pass this over to Tiferet, the Director of Customer Success at Anecdotes, who will be moderating the next part of our program.
Thanks, Esther. And thank you for that great presentation. So many great tips. I'm excited to announce our 2 additional speakers who are joining Esther for a conversation about how to succeed as a new compliance leader. We have Tim Anderson, the Director of GRC and Privacy at ID.me, and Spencer Sheehan, Risk and Compliance Senior Engineer at Instacart. Thank you both so much for being with us today. Before we dive in, I want to remind our audience that you can ask questions in the Q&A box. Tim, let me start with you. Can you please tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us about one mistake you made starting out that our audience should try to avoid?
Sure. And it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. So I started out many years ago when security and compliance were definitely the house of no uniformly across the industry and on the other side of the wall. So I spent many years with federal civilian in the US and DoD building out security programs and trying to break down those barriers. And then moved on to more cloud-centric activities with AWS. And then finally, currently in my role here at ID.me, building out a governance, risk, and compliance and privacy program to meet particular needs of protecting critical information. So one of the early missteps, I would say, is probably common among folks who are delved in compliance a lot, and that's not understanding the nuance between business objectives and security. In particular, how to be a good partner, how to understand and how to drive real business value, and knowing that compliance, those activities actually are open the door for market access. And in conjunction with that leads to not being able to accurately and appropriately report your own success as a compliance leader to the business. Because if you don't understand that nuance, it's hard to build out the metrics and other elements that really show the value you drive to a business.
Amazing, thanks so much. And Spencer, we have the same question for you. Can you please tell us a little bit about yourself? And again, one thing that our audience should try to avoid when they're starting out their new role.
Yeah, my name is Spencer Sheehan. I live in San Francisco, California. I've been in governance, risk, compliance for about 7 years now. I've worked at public accounting companies doing audits, IT SOX audits for a lot of tech companies over the years, and have also worked on SOC, PCI audits, HIPAA, whatever certification, alphabet soup. And now I work at Instacart in their infrastructure engineering organization as part of the GRC, governance, risk, compliance team. My biggest mistake, many mistakes have been made. But I think that the biggest mistake that I can think of is when you're meeting with leaders, decision makers at a company. Maybe you're lucky enough to sit with executives at like a steering committee, like an audit steering committee or something like that. Don't be afraid to speak up. You're a professional, and you probably have a certain amount of experience that's gotten you here this far. And so don't be afraid to say what's on your mind. And if you feel like something has been overlooked in a meeting, speak up. I remember there was a time I was in a meeting with a CFO, like chief legal officer, CTO, and then like the audit partner, and then the internal audit partner. So external and internal. It was like everyone was there in the meeting, and it was very heated. And I talked to the audit partner after the meeting and said, "Oh yeah, did you know like this happened?" And she said, "Why didn't you bring that up? You should have brought that up." I was like, I was afraid because it was a heated moment. But don't be afraid. Everyone's trying to work towards a common goal.
Thank you so much, Spencer. And yeah, generally speaking, great advice that we can all relate to. Esther, what about you? Can you also share a mistake that you made at the beginning that our audience should try to avoid?
Yeah, of course. So first, I would say that as part of being a compliance leader, you're very exposed in the company, which put you in a position which a lot of people know you and a lot of departments get to know you. And a lot of times you can be that annoying people that that annoying person that I was talking about right before. But don't take it personal. Don't take it too personally. I mean, one thing is your role, other thing is your personal life. And I was used to mix a little bit between the two of them. And I think in general, it's a good tip. But yeah, so just don't take things too personally.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So Esther, going back to your presentation, you gave us a few tips about how to make your compliance program more efficient, such as automation. What other ways can a new compliance leader make their program better? And what role has automation played in your journey? Spencer, would you like to start?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think at larger enterprise organizations, it's easier to build solutions because you might have the internal resources, or you can, hire an army of consultants to implement something for you internally. Like, let's say you want to automate your testing or something like that. But now that I'm at a smaller, I mean, for me, it's smaller. It's like high 2000 corporate employees at Instacart. We don't have unlimited, people to throw at things. And so something that I've learned is there's a million third-party tools out there that are made for compliance professionals, and they solve a lot of different problems. So don't be afraid to have the authority or take the liberty to have some demos, and just reach out to some organizations and see what tools are available out there depending on the problem you're trying to solve. And actually, you might realize you can refine your problem statement and what your solution should be after you look at a few tools, and just involve a few other leaders in your organization who are nice and open-minded, like people in IT or people in security, engineering, compliance. And even if you don't end up using a tool, it's a really great way to kind of brainstorm further. It sort of forces you.
Thank you. Tim, would you care to follow up on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this alone, like making your program better and the use of automation could go all day on the aspects of this. I think there's a few areas where folks may overlook, especially in the compliance space. One is really at a fundamental level, understanding your business, understanding the products, the services you're selling, like to a deep degree, like how does the business make money? Because that'll really coalesce with what type of activities you would need to do from a compliance perspective, right? And the regimes you go after, the market access you're looking for. And just a fundamental understanding of the risk tolerances, the appetite for the business, because in the end, it's all a risk-based decision making that you need to be striving for, and understanding control conformance and things like that really need to be in the lens of where the appetite's at and those tolerance levels for the business. I think also in general, compliance folks need to really get on board with understanding iterative success when they're doing their planning and looking out and building that relationship with the business. And one of the things, we like to talk about agile, and this is the age of DevOps, DevSecOps, everything else. But then you look at a compliance person's sort of roadmap or project design, and it's very waterfall a lot of times. So understanding like iterative improvements, how to deliver in a consistent and routine manner to build trust with the business is really, really important. And then that delves into automation and understanding like, all right, you want to make your first foray into it, good, easy areas, whether you buy products or use open source, is things like automated evidence collection, and sort of the low-hanging fruit of activities in order to drive down the burden against engineering teams and other folks that you have to ask favors of for these things. And then over time, grow and mature that to where you eventually get to continuous monitoring of control.
Thank you so much. Spencer, you mentioned earlier working with colleagues from other departments. If you could talk a little bit about, what have been the most valuable relationships you've built in the company that have helped you succeed in your role?
That's a really good question. I think there's two kinds of people that are really valuable to get to know. Some have a breadth of knowledge across the business and really know who's who and can kind of turn you to the right person, and they're kind of like a map, a dictionary or an encyclopedia of, hey, I have a problem with this, where should I go? And they just kind of know who that person is. They have that institutional knowledge. I've found, there's a TPM and she reports to the CTO at my company, and she, I swear, she knows everything. And it may not necessarily be that she knows the depth, 10 feet deep of everything, but just enough to be deadly. And if I have a problem that it's a little unclear where to go to, and I'd be spinning my wheels trying to find that person on my own, who is the correct contact, I just go to her. She's one of my people that I'll go to, and I'll Slack her. And usually, she helps me. The other kind of person would be someone who's really a subject matter expert. And so this is not like one single relationship, but it's kind of scattered throughout the company. Take, for example, a data engineer. A data engineer, they would have a deep, deep understanding of how your data is structured in like a data warehouse. So when I'm tackling issues like data governance, it might be a little bit more, governance risk compliance minded, like policies, procedures, and standards, but they have like the technical expertise that can kind of help me connect the dots. And then, legal, when making friends with legal, they can help much more with like what are the requirements, GDPR, other, laws that you need to think about. So I think as long as you make as many, acquaintances and professional connections as much as possible, you'll be really successful.
Couldn't agree more. And Tim, what about you? What relationships do you view as important that our audience should be prioritizing in their new roles?
Well, I totally agree with Spencer on all the ones he mentioned. It's I think with compliance space and GRC in general, it's a unique thing because it touches all areas of the business because of different levels to different degrees. And having folks have historical knowledge is vital. Having folks that are progressive and want to move the needle forward and understanding their needs and wants are vital as well. For me, and I should caveat too, that a lot of it depends on what type of business it is, whether you're public sector, private, sort of the construct of it. But in general, for me, legal's always been a big one to cultivate early and maintain a strong relationship. They own corporate risk usually, and you're doing, security risk and other elements that, dovetail well together. And, legal can move mountains for you. Once you've established that relationship and understanding the needs of it. But in general, cultivate as much as you can across the leadership of the business, because it's really important. That gets lost, based off of the reputation of security being insular sometimes. But you need that empathy. You need that empathy to understand their needs, their wants, their issues, how to help them, how to allow them to do their job better or get out of their way, right? And understand how to do that as well. So I think, overall, there's quite a few, but if I had to boil it down, I think legal starting off is always a good point.
Thanks so much, Tim. Esther, what about you?
So, of course, I agree with the Tim and Spencer in that. Legal is a really important point to be connected with. I would also point DevOps team and platform teams in some companies. It's so important to know what is going on in the back end and you know, all the data centers again, and also sales. I had a great connection with the sales department in my previous role. We had such a strong connection that I was update on every step of, you know, of the business and where is it going and the pipeline and everything. It really connected me to understand where the company is going. And it's just a good feeling to feel just, you know, not just being in need, but also like help and support, and that people need you and you need them in the same way. So yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. So Tim, we focused so far on the first 3 months in the role. Where do you think somebody should start, somebody that is starting out should strive to be 1 year in?
Yeah, at 1 year, I think there's a lot of the program structure that you're executing on that need to be in place. You should, you know, have demonstrated that, you know, whether you're maintaining a compliance regime, onboarding one, maintaining control conformance, like those sort of fundamental activities of success from a compliance standpoint of, you know, you're doing the job in that regard. But you should also have your roadmap ready. Like you should have a clear indication of the next 18 months to 2 years, depending on the business and the business cycles, something you can clearly demonstrate to leaders on, you know, what the expectations are, where we can have consensus on where to execute. That really needs to be thought out well. And then well-established OKRs or KPIs or whichever sort of elements you're doing, and making sure that they include elements that reporting metrics that show value you're bringing to the business. For example, like if you're doing all sorts of customer assurance activities, you know, answering questionnaires, having meetings with customers to close deals, you know, around compliance activities, are you reporting and capturing those elements from an influence revenue standpoint or other aspect, like showing like the doors are opening for the business? And then I think tools like one of the things is you're never going to hire yourself out of a problem. So even if you have headcount, it's never going to be enough headcount. So that's where we get automation and tools and those things. By a year, you should have a clear idea, I think, of what your tooling needs are. You should have sort of sampled some already, implemented some elements in order to really drive down operational burdens.
Amazing. Thanks so much. Esther, what about you? Where do you think you look to be in terms of your standing in the organization 1 year into the job?
So as I said before, compliance and security in general, it's a marathon, and you don't look only like 1 quarter ahead. You're always looking how you can improve your compliance posture, your security posture. So in general, the best best practice that works for me is look at the KPIs I set in the last year and look how I can take those and maximize the time, or how to make them more efficient. Okay. For example, if I'm now speaking about compliance program in terms of certifications so how can I achieve more in the next year, but in a realistic way? So it's always look what I did and how I can do it better, and then expand on it.
Fantastic. Spencer, what about you?
Yeah, I think I'm going to steal a little bit what Esther said, because I totally agree with the KPIs. I think if you can, at my company, we really call them like just metrics in general. I think if you can measure your success and say, you know, almost give the answers to the test before the test happens, meaning before, you know, year 2, you're planning, you're saying, this is what success is going to look like. And it's really hard to find what those measurements can be sometimes for compliance professionals, especially if you don't have like 100 certifications. You know, it's hard to say. It's easier to say, oh, we want 50 out of those 100 certifications. Hard to execute. But if you don't have that kind of program, it can be difficult coming up with with the metrics. So, you know, I've done stuff in the past that are as simple as surveys, making sure that control owners understand their responsibilities across the company and showing that that number increases over time. Really simple stuff that you can actually quantify. But I would say, yeah, so I mean, at a more startup company, it's difficult sometimes to get people to force to look a year or two ahead. And it's very much like this quarter, this month, what are we doing? Okay, we did it. We didn't do it. But I agree. I think you need to look at, or at least have in your back pocket, a multi-year strategy. If you had a magic wand and a bag of money, what would you do? And I have trouble answering that question all the time, but it's something that's always on my mind because you're never going to find the perfect answer. But as long as you keep kind of thinking that mindset, eventually there's going to be an opportunity. Someone's going to have budget, or there's going to be something that's going to allow you to kind of like get closer to that dream. But you have to have that in mind and that strategy kind of in place. And I would say just start communicating. It can be in bits and pieces, little, you know, position papers, or it sounds kind of bureaucratic, but memos, or documents or wikis on, hey, here's how I think about change management at this company. This is what we should be doing. This is what we are doing. And this is what I think a solution is. And just farm for dissent, you know, show it to people that are going to take it apart, but at least you have their attention and engagement.
Thank you so much. We're nearing the end of the panel. So I just wanted to ask for any last words of advice that you have. Tim, if you want to start.
Yeah, sure. So I would just tell everyone in the compliance space, look to be bold in solutioning, be a builder. I mean, it's one of those things where people, I think, get stuck in a rut on sort of a traditionalist view on how to be conformant to controls and other things, and look for novel approaches. Always be willing to be flexible. And there's compensating controls exist for a reason. So understand that. Understand, what are different ways to tackle the same problem and give the business what it needs, and just be ready to educate auditors, assessors. They can be open to it. So as long as you have a strong argument and evidence to back it up.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Tim. Spencer, do you want to follow?
Yeah, this one's a hard one. I think if I had to say one thing and leave you with, I would say make sure that you feel uncomfortable when you're working, meaning that you're really stepping outside of your comfort zone. I know that's kind of obvious, but once you get too comfortable and you get into your process of, okay, my audit has these 10 steps and this is exactly what I'm going to do, and that's all I need to do. That's the wrong way to go about it. I think you need to be much more disruptive. You need to think outside the box, come up with new creative solutions, look at tools to implement, look at changing processes, and talk to your leaders. Don't be afraid to talk to them and hear what their concerns are, and find creative ways to approach them from a risk-based perspective.
Fantastic. Thank you. Esther, something from you maybe to summarize everything that we've heard today.
Sure. So first of all, thank you all for joining us today. I think it's really, it's about when people stop and make time to learn and expand their knowledge and hear others. So I think it's amazing that you guys spend this time, making yourself more professional by hearing others. So this is amazing. So yeah, again, I think it was great, and thank you guys for joining us as well. And that's it. Feel free to reach out at any time to me directly, or I'm sure Tim and Spencer as well. But that's it.
Perfect. Perfect way to end this insightful conversation. Thank you. I want to thank Esther, Tim, and Spencer for all of your great insight, which I'm sure has been invaluable to our audience. I also want to thank everyone for joining us today. And if you want to continue the conversation, as Esther said, feel free to reach out to any of our speakers. We'd be more than happy to answer your questions. Enjoy the rest of your day.